Hello everyone, and welcome to this latest video discussion as part of the RICS Tech Partner Programme. My name is Andrew Knight and I've been with RICS for over 11 years now. I sit within the standards, regulation and thought leadership part of the organisation, and my role is to look at the effect of data and technology right across the built and natural environment. With over 130,000 members worldwide, working right across the property life cycle, working across assets such as land and residential and commercial, alternative assets and infrastructure, there's a huge canvas upon which the effects of data and technology are now playing out in a positive way. And today I'm really glad to have Ahmed from Rented join us. So please do join us on the call, Ahmed.
Hi, Andrew.
Hi, great to have you on the call. And before we sort of get into the kind of details of the data and tech side of things, it's always great to kind of paint a human picture of our tech partners. So it'd be great to hear about you and your team's background and backstory and the kind of origin story of how Rented came about.
Sure. So I've always been in the property sector, prime central London. I was lucky enough to be taken under the wing by my cousin at the time, who'd been in the industry for 25 years now, and he was in the prime residential development. Took me in. I started literally making coffees and teas in the office, running around. These guys are designing these high-end, £1,000 a foot at the time, like high-end property, Kensington, Knightsbridge. Loved the industry, loved the property sector, and I started going out with him once these properties were actually under development. Running around, learning the game, how they called it, and through again contacts and being in and around the high net worth individual kind of space, we started growing the company, and I shortly thereafter became just under him, a pretty senior position. I was lucky to be in that position, and we started actually opening a private office, and we had two major clients. One was a Middle Eastern family, and one were from the south of France, and we started running their investment portfolios in the prime London real estate sector. That was from sourcing the projects to development costs to actually getting planning, all the way to build out. And some of those were actually yield plays, so they were building to rent, and some were straight exits, so building units and then selling them to the open market and users. And through that industry, I was in that kind of sector for 9 years, worked on some pretty amazing properties. And I started a lot of the investments that were coming through were actually more and more based on rental incomes. So I started to deal with that side of the industry a lot more. And 6 years ago, I met my wife now, and it was her, she was given the kind of lead to find us a property to move into. Lo and behold, 3 months later, we're no nearer to finding anything, really struggling. We were looking in Ealing at the time. She was getting calls from Twickenham, Richmond offices, Chiswick. We're not looking in that area, bombardment of emails, calls at 7 p.m. And it kind of hit home that, there must be a way this can be simplified. Taking the journey now past to actually finding the property, having to book the viewing, obviously it's back and forth, what time works for the agent, and if it's tenanted or not, and so on and so forth. And then all the way to finding the property, making the offer, filling out the form sheet, making that deposit, holding deposit, all the way to actually moving in. It wasn't the simplest of journeys. At the time, because I was dealing so much with the lettings sector, should I call it that, I really took it upon myself to say, you know what, there has to be an easier way. I spoke to one of my friends who was a school friend of mine, known him since we were 8 years old, a lettings agent, again in the prime central London, and he said to me, look, Ahmed, this is just the way it is, this is how it's been for centuries now. I said, there must be a way where it can be simplified. I mean, there's so many barriers to entry for people that do not know how to rent. He said, look, what are you thinking? Literally, I then went back to the drawing board, started drawing out what the current process is, how that can be simplified. And through that journey and through networking events, I was lucky enough to meet my co-founder, Lawrence Hansford. Lawrence comes from a marketing branding background. And as soon as I told him about the concept, he said, mate, me and my wife are in the same, dilemma. We just rented, we're looking to move to the Hamptons, and it's been a nightmare. And half the properties on Rightmove and Zoopla are just there, but they're dead, and you have to kind of call the agent. Sorry, that one's let, but can I get your details? So we then started designing Rented. It was Lawrence and I worked literally for a year non-stop in the evenings, during the workflow, during the experience, during the user interfaces, and then developed and launched our minimum viable product, our MVP. And from our MVP, we then went to market and started actually doing focus groups with landlords and renters to actually understand the pains and gains that they go through. And then, thankfully, through those focus groups, we were able to fine-tune the platform and launch our fully fledged website, iOS and Android, to come soon, 2 months ago.
Well, it's great, and it's always fascinating how many of these kind of firms like yourselves have started almost from that personal experience, actually experiencing the pain, and obviously additionally having that kind of property background. I mean, you've alluded to I think quite a few of the kind of issues around pain points, but if you were to kind of summarize the main issues, themes that what Rented is doing for the rental market, what would you, based on those pieces of insight in terms of focus groups on your own experience, what are the main areas that you're kind of addressing?
So over the last 10 years, I'd say the adoption of on-demand services in society are really taken to the forefront, whether it's on-demand deliveries, whether it's on-demand, if you want to book a hotel and it's straight online instead of you going through the traditional turning up to a travel agent. So what we've actually done is we've taken the barriers. So for example, from every single step. So searching the property, you only have live listings on Rented. If it's on Rented, it's live, and if it's let, then it's not there. Viewing, we are the first platform to implement on-demand viewing. You book a time and date, and one of our viewers will be there to show you around, subject to, of course, if anything was to happen, or the tenants, for example, during COVID, we had to be very cautious because people were COVID positive, so we had to advise our applicants of that. But literally, apart from the COVID experience, it is on demand. Making the offer. When I go to a traditional agent and I make the offer and I write it on a form, that offer is then taken through that individual and then communicated to the landlord. We've broken that. Rented enables the renter and landlord to directly negotiate the asking price. And through our focal groups, we actually realized that over 70% of landlords, all they care about are two major things. How much am I getting for my property? And is this person fit and proper to take? That's all they care about. They don't want to manage viewings. They don't care about how you market it. They don't want to check the tenants in. They just want all of that done apart from those two main points. So we've put those two main points at the focal group for our landlords. So when the offer comes in, it's communicated directly to the landlord. We've given the landlord three simple choices, either to accept the offer, decline the offer, or counter the offer. And they can counter the offer not just with the price, but also the tenancy term and the break clause and the move-in date if something's changed for the landlord. And after that, Rented then credit and references the incoming applicant. We do a full profile check. And once they have passed, that is then communicated to the landlord that they have actually passed our diligent checks. Rented then pre-populates the contract from the information that's been provided from both user and the offer. It's then pre-populated. They instantly sign that via DocuSign. The tenant is then taken to make the payments directly on the platform. And once payments have been collected and direct debit set up for their rent, they then choose the time to be checked into the property on their move-in date. And our inventory team then check them into the property, carry out the full inventory report, and communicate that directly to the landlord. And if I may, during the entire process, the landlord is also always in the know of where the renter is in that journey. And also, once the payment is made, that payment is taken, our accounts team then deposit the first month's rent less our fee to the landlord, and the deposit payment is tied up with my deposits. So we do the entire rental spectrum for the landlord. They do not lift a finger apart from negotiating on the property.
All right. And I guess apart from having to obviously change your company name, were you ever tempted to look at sales as well as rental, or was it always going to be a focus on the kind of the rental transaction piece?
So frankly speaking, from our personal experience, what got me into renting in the first place, obviously it was the rental space. As we've more and more kind of grown into the space and done more due diligence on technology within the prop tech sector as an entirety, we've actually grown to find that renting property is a lot less emotional than purchasing property. When you're buying or selling a home, it's very, whether you're the buyer or the seller, it's very emotional. You may be parting with your life savings, or you may be selling your home that you've lived in for 25, 30 years. Whereas renting is a lot more like, how can I say, in this day and age, it's the norm to rent. Rentals have been, the rental sector has been growing year on year due to obviously the issues with people having deposits and saving for that deposit. So we found that we should, first of all, tackle the rental space and give landlords and renters this one-stop solution, end-to-end platform for renting a property. But you never know in the future what it holds.
Exactly. I suppose you're right, and I suppose that the word I was almost searching for is it's a bit more transactional, that the rental market in that sense. As you say, people aren't so emotionally tied. They're being perhaps very rational about price point and location for schools or job or whatever, but there isn't that kind of emotional investment in where you want to live. It's a much more functional transaction, I guess, in that sense, and it's a good way that you described it. Now, I guess moving on from all that kind of market and great insight you've got there, we are here to talk about technology to some degree. So I'm interested to hear the kind of technology and other sort of services you've bolted into the platform. So what sort of technology sits underneath it all and delivers all these various parts of the process?
So we have a dedicated tech team in Macedonia. We have a team of 5 engineers, and on our MVP, so the minimum viable product that we built was directly on iOS. We wanted it live, we wanted it held, we wanted to test how users felt with actually transacting via a handheld device rather than sat doing it online, which is what the traditional moves are. But since last year, closing our first fundraiser of £250,000 to then build out the full technology, we've been able to build a fully responsive web app. So it's web-based. It's built in React code. So the kind of market leader currently. Off that, we have a Firebase backend that holds all of our admin side of the platform. So all the listings, all the photos, the floor plans. That sits on the back end, and on the front of that, it then goes to an iOS and an Android app, which feed off it. We have integrations with DocuSign. We have integrations with Stripe for making payments. We have integrations with property data, because what we're actually working on currently is pre-populating a guide price for the landlord once he uploads his property. So like an instant val, if you like. So we're working closely on that. They're the major integrations into Rented. Everything else is bespoke, and everything else is fully automated via our platform.
Indeed, but it's a great message there about that integration with other kind of best of breed type add-ins, where you're not trying to recreate some wheels that are already out there that do certain functions very well. I mean, what's your favorite feature, if you had to kind of choose one that you were most kind of proud of?
So obviously, if you're going to ask me, it's buyers, because I have a few. But off the top of my head, my favorite one is the Rent Smarter tool, and we just deployed that with the web app. So it's we've taken the rental journey and kind of started it backwards, if you like. So you literally can go on to Rented, you put your income, your yearly income, you put what area you want to live in, and Rented will instantly calculate how much you can afford, so what you can afford in rent, what your bills will be, and then gives you properties that directly fit your criteria. So instead of you kind of going through the search of 2-bed, 2-bath, up to 2,000 a month in W5, we've actually turned it on its head. All you need to do is put your income, what area you want to live in, and Rented will do the answers and the legwork for you.
And what's the profile of the kind of typical, if there's such a thing, you know, the typical landlord, the typical renter that you're seeing using the platform?
So we've been inundated. Most of our renters or applicants are millennials.
Yeah.
They just love how it is. We've also, on the landlord side, we're more the mama and papa's type landlords, the 1 to 5 units. And we've been very, very blessed in having, how can I say, like high net worth individual landlords on there that have listed, you know, properties for £300,000-400,000 a year. Currently on Rented, we have a house in Knightsbridge that is up for £71,500 per calendar month. And the landlord could not believe that he would save, you know, with us, we have a fixed fee model of 799. So he couldn't believe that he got all the photos, the virtual tour, all of the services, no upfront cost. And if we don't let it, he's not committed. And if we do let it, you know, on an 8%, 7% fee, he's saving tens of thousands of pounds in fees. So thankfully speaking, the adoption from both ends, we are growing. We have now over 20,000 applicants that have downloaded the app and actually used it. And we have over 1,000 landlords signed up.
That's great. And as ever, you know, one of the challenges of you know, not only you know, an emerging prop tech firm, but established ones, is the kind of presentation to the marketplace of the services you offer, the kind of value proposition, to use the marketing phrase. How do you kind of describe, you know, in hopefully as simple a way as possible, what the proposition is to the renter and the landlord? Because you've obviously got two, you know, distinct sectors there that you need to attract and need to simply present why Rented, sort of thing.
Totally agree. So I'm very blessed to have Lawrence. He's my guru when it comes to obviously branding and marketing, getting that message across. We get, so because Lawrence obviously is a co-founder, all of our content created for Rented comes at no cost. And through market research, and we know what people want to hear, whether you're a landlord or renter, via, as previously discussed, those focal groups that we had. So landlords care obviously about how much they're being charged. You are taking them from the traditional, you know, agent who does in person, do everything for them, to kind of more of virtual space. So we always give the landlords the comfort that there is always someone there at the end of the call. There is a direct call button on our app if you need, but rest assured you won't, because the platform does everything. You just simply need to click one of 3 buttons and we'll check in the tenant for you. So we take it through stages of kind of educating our landlords on what the value proposition is, what our USP is, how to make their lives simpler. And for renters, it's very simple. It's the first end-to-end platform for you to conclude the entire transaction. You know, renters can't believe, we've had phone calls in the office where renters book a viewing and say, is that it? Is that it? Someone will meet you there. Are you sure? I'm concerned. Is no one going to come back to me? No, just no, don't worry. One of our viewers will be there. So the on-demand adoption, as previously discussed with yourself, for millennials is the way forward. It's the way the world will be. Uber, you know, Deliveroo, it's the way the world's moving towards. And we've wanted to propel Rented into that space. And thankfully speaking, we feel like we have with the service. And there's a short video that can take you through that. And I'll play that shortly.
Yeah, let's have a look. Well, that's great. I think that makes it fairly clear. So, what physical areas do you cover in terms of geographical reach at the moment?
So currently we cover the entirety of London within the M25. We've been very blessed, again, if I may say, because of the coverage and the way that the platform transacts. We've actually just deployed Rented in Dubai.
All right.
We had a very prominent individual in Dubai see the platform within the property space, and they've just, so, you know, I could say JV, but the kind of the CEO of that company has taken a share of Rented Dubai, and we've just launched it in Dubai. We're also in discussions currently with Canada is the next city to come within the next 4 months. Again, very similar to London. Major issues in acquiring property for millennials. Rentals are the norm. And we have a plan in our runway that in the next 18 months, we'll be hitting New York City.
All right.
So targets of major cities, and then once we've concluded those cities, we will then look to strategically grow within the countries.
And from a kind of technical kind of feature perspective, are there things that you want to add to the platform in addition to this kind of growth from a geographical perspective?
Yes. So I'm bound by a few NDAs, so I can't disclose everything. However, you are correct in saying we are looking to build a global leader in the rental space, not just for an end-to-end transactional purpose. We are also building out, tackling a medium-term marketplace, which is currently underserviced in the sector. If you are a renter coming to the marketplace, you will find 2 ways to rent a property, either short let on Airbnb, obviously the player, or you will go to an agent or Rented on a long term. There is no one servicing that 1 to 6 month space, which is in dire need of servicing right now, just because of people working from home, the localities of things, people looking to come here, they need treatment for 3 months, they want to stay somewhere, and they get hit on that nightly stay rate on an Airbnb. Whereas with us, we're actually going to be giving our landlords exposure across the long and medium term. So when a landlord uploads his property onto Rented, Rented will automatically give him a price. If you offer it on the long, for example, 2-bed in Ealing at £2,000 a month, let's say, if you put it up on a medium term, you may get 1.5x that, so you'll be able to get, argument's sake, 3,000, 3,500. And the landlord's discretion is to either accept or he doesn't have to do it, but it will give landlords 1, better exposure, 2, better revenue, and 3, the ease of the renter coming prepaying that stay at a cheaper price that he would pay on a short-term let will then really open up the marketplace for renters and landlords to then again expose themselves to a different dimension of the rental marketplace.
No, and that's certainly a trend I've heard from other industry players around this kind of mix of length of tenure, where, you know, perhaps even, you know, institutional build to rent looking at a mix where they'll have an asset, and they recognise that to maximize their or minimize their voids, to have that mix of long, medium, short term, to make sure that the assets being worked as hard as possible. So I know you talked about that really expensive property. Was it 60,000-70,000 pounds per month? Is that the most expensive one you've run through the platform?
It is. That's, you know, that's just shy of £1 million a year. So yeah. Yes, that is the it's a pretty special property.
Yeah.
So yeah, that is the highest that we've currently got on our books. But we've done a lot in prime central London. I mean, the average I would say is about 60,000-70,000 worth of annual. But as we grow, as we scale, you know, we try and save as much as we can monetarily wise to the landlords. And on average, I'm sure you're aware, the average fee is about £1,400 paid to agents. You know, we're almost up to 42% saving on that. And we also offer a few more services than a traditional agent at a discounted rate. So when you upload, you get your virtual tour for free, you get your photos for free, you get your floor plan for free, you get the marketing for free. And as explained, we only take the fee once the renter has paid his first month and his deposit. So nothing comes out upfront from the landlord.
Indeed. Now, I mean, we've touched on the kind of short term, or that sort of, longer than Airbnb, but shorter than 6 months plus. What are the kind of trends are you seeing, or predictions you might want to make about how this rental market is going to evolve? Because clearly, with capital values at the state they're in, there's clearly still going to be a huge demand for rental, but there's obviously also that increasing activity from the institutional build to rent multifamily, as it's called in the US, perhaps moving away from that sort of mom and pop 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 properties. How do you see the rental market evolving in terms of that supply demand dynamic and the actors who will be on that, particularly on that perhaps supply side?
I think the large players in the BTR sector will continue to build out. I see the marketplace really growing over the next 5 to 10 years. I actually believe that over the next 5 to 10 years, people will live to rent in rented properties their entire life. I think the ownership model has really diluted in every sector, whether it's from buying a car to even owning a mobile phone. Now you can go to Apple and lease your phone for a year and go back, give it back and get the new one. So the values of ownership globally have really diluted. And I feel like because us as humans, and especially exacerbated by COVID, want and can work from home more with more flexibility, I see that the trends will only continue to increase in terms of rents globally. I think that the values for those built to rent, I think, will continue to improve on the spec. I see like the properties that are coming out to the marketplace currently with developers who are addressing that market are improving on the spec of the finish, much nicer properties, and the adoption from the renters, they're getting snapped up, especially in major cities. I mean, I'm not sure if you've had a look, but Dubai currently is having its best year ever, just because of the amount of properties that are coming to market, the amount of people that are moving to Dubai over the medium term, and the housing market, has really, really boomed. But I always go back to it, London will always be London. Will always come back, whether they moved out during COVID. And as you are aware, prices are really spiking. There's a real lack of stock in the marketplace. Landlords are getting rid of those COVID contracts they called and reletting them 15, 20% higher. So we feel we're in the right space. We feel that we are building the right ecosystem. We're giving the correct services to both the landlord and the renter. And as explained, there is a lot more to come in tech. What we've just deployed is our version 1. Medium term lets are coming in the next 3 months. We are then tackling the credit and referencing sector that is the bulkiest part of the rental transaction. All the way to start to speak to the government about deposits and that value of monetary, like value just stuck in an account, no appreciation for anyone across the sector. So we will tackle each as they, as our runway and our strategies are built to do. But yeah, we feel that we're in the right space and in the right city to build a global leader.
Indeed. Well, it's been fascinating, Ahmed, and a great insight on both the technology and the current and future state of the market itself. For today, thanks so much for your time. Been great to talk, and I look forward to catching up perhaps in a few months and see how things are moving on.
Andrew, always a pleasure. Thank you so much for your time.